Good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible enough, and welcome to the 27th webinar of the IEA Kenya. The IEA Kenya is an institution that carries out research and advocacy on key policy issues that affect the country. And today, one of those very hot topics that have been gaining traction in the past 2 or so months has been the issue of the genetically modified organisms. And we have taken the opportunity today to just have a discussion on this issue and try to demystify what it actually means to reintroduce GMOs back to the country. And to do that, we have a panel of experts. As you can see from our agenda, and we are sorry for beginning late, we were meant to start at 10. It's now 10:15, 10:16, so kindly forgive us. So we'll have our first presenter, Emmanuel Atamba, who is the Root to Food Coordinator, take us through the implications of GMOs on Kenyans, and then we'll also have to dissect what GMO space within the space of seed and seed sovereignty means for the farmers in Kenya. So I'll just get straight into it and get us on by just giving a brief background of what has happened so far and what we actually intend to achieve. So when we talk about GMOs, what are we talking about? What are we talking about when we say GMOs? What are these GMOs in Kenya? And this is the outline of the presentation that I have, a very short one, but just to give us context around the issue of GMOs. So we'll look at what GMOs are and the chronology of how GMOs came into being, and what is it that is important from GMOs that we need to embrace, and of course, how the aspect of GMOs in Kenya. And then Emmanuel Tambo will come after this to talk us through the issues being raised around GMOs in the country. So by definition, GMOs is a GMO, genetically modified organism, is an organism produced through genetic modification, and this actually takes place in a laboratory setting. Another definition states that GMO is an organism whose genetic composition has been altered for a particular purpose or usage. And this purpose or usage vary according to location, weather patterns, conditions, and so on and so forth. So these are the kind of things that we're trying to look at. What exactly is a GMO and how does it come into place? So if you look at the historical perspective of GMOs, how did GMOs come to be? Now, the organization called Monsanto is actually the one that developed the GMO technology and also patented it back in the day, early 90s. But Monsanto was purchased by Bayer, which is a US-based firm. So that's now actually where the technology is domiciled. But following that, the technology was approved for use. So genetically modified organisms or crops came into being in the United States of America from the year 1994, and more specifically to crops such as maize, cotton, and soybeans. And research shows that around that time, about 90% of these crops were actually GM foods and were covering large tracts of field in the States. But then 10 years later, by 2004, we had a widespread use and adoption of GMO around the world in about 24 countries by 2004. That increased in 2014 by around 20%. And as you can see, this is an issue that's now currently gaining global acceptance and getting traction. And it's also important to note that the use of GMOs was approved by the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Health Organization, and also the Food and Drug Administration of the United States. So bearing that in mind, what is the importance of GMOs in our current setting? And I'm just giving a broad context. Our panelists will bring us to the nitty-gritties as we move along. One of the underlying benefits that have been proposed by those pro-GMOs is that GMOs improve yields of various crops, and crops that are genetically modified are drought resistant. Some are also pest resistant. And these aspects actually mean that GMO production, crop production is actually cheaper in the long run. But then again, at the back of this, especially in the Kenyan setting, we have the recurring issue of food insecurity. So the introduction of GM was actually trying to rein in on the issue of food insecurity in the country. The pros and cons are there, and I think it's a discussion that we are just beginning to have, and it's not going anywhere soon, so we'll discuss this as we move along. Then for Kenya, more specifically, if you can recall, back in 2012, during the reign of the late Mwai Kibaki, based on a report that was carried out in France, GMOs were actually linked to increased cases of cancer. And on that basis, Kenya as a country banned use of GMOs. So for 10 years since then, up until 3rd of October, the ban was lifted, and that means that actually GM products are now in the country. But let's be specific to maize, which is now the in thing. And I think in most cases, when Kenyans talk of food security, we talk about maize availability. Let me not talk about that much, but now, testing of GM maize in the country began in the year 2010. Okay, that's now just about 2 years after the ban came into place. The approval for field, that means that approval for testing in the field in controlled zones was granted in 2016. Last year, this research was done complete. It's now waiting for approval at the cabinet level. So it's a wait and see what will happen when that approval actually takes place or not. So with that, I want to welcome Emmanuel Atamba. Emmanuel, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So kindly beam your slides and take us through. Welcome.
Oriedo, and I work with Root to Food, and I'm also a farmer myself. I'm trained in agriculture, majored in agriculture economics. And you know, this discussion about GMOs, whether to use or not to use GMOs, is one of the discussions that I've been involved in a lot throughout my career, because I focus a lot on food systems, but then also the right to food, which for me is really, where we should be aiming all our activities that entail food production and making food available. The benchmark is really the right to food. And I just want to, explain that even in our 2010 constitution, under Article 43(1)(c), the right to food is explicitly provided for in the constitution. And Article 43(1)(c), which says that every person has the right to be free from hunger, and then it puts a comma there, and then have access to adequate food of acceptable quality, And the comma there between freedom from hunger and adequate food is really to say that freedom from hunger is non-negotiable. It is non-negotiable, completely non-negotiable, that everyone should be free from hunger. And this is a human right that is universal, and every human being has the right to enjoy it. And not only for Kenyans, even here in Kenya, if someone lands here by mistake from any country, I don't want to mention any country, but someone just lands here, they have a right to food. As long as they are a human, they are Homo sapiens, we confirm this is a human being, they have a right to food. And even those who care about animals a lot will also say animals have the same. You cannot keep a dog without feeding it. You cannot keep a cat without feeding it and all that, because food is the basis of life. So this is where this conversation is squarely falling onto. And I don't want to lose that, because the moment we lose that, then we start talking about, productivity and all that, then we lose the reason why we actually produce food in the first place. We lose the direction, and we lose the bearing at that point, and therefore now it becomes completely very difficult to actually evaluate ourselves and say, okay, are we doing the right thing? Are we actually achieving the objective? So I just wanted to put that into context. So we, as Root to Food, have a clear position on GMOs, that we do not support the use of GMOs. But nonetheless, we discuss this objectively, and I wish that, as we discuss, you are not looking at my position, but you're looking at the issues that I'm raising, because I'm raising these issues not based on my positions, but really from very objective discussion and debate point of view, so that we are all able to start to think, and really assess these issues. So the debate about GMOs, what are the issues? What are the issues that are being asked? One of the key things of this debate is the safety. Are GMOs safe or not? And there is no 100% guarantee of the safety of GMO products. That one we have to agree. In as much as there has not been any approved science, and again, this is something that I know some of us are members of IEA, and and members of academia, and people do research and all this. We also have to understand the context of research. Sometimes research is shut down by the people who have the power. So there is no verified research that is accepted universally that shows that GMO has negative health effects. Okay, but the absence of that, the absence of clear evidence that it has potential effects or it can cause cancer, does not then guarantee safety. So there is no 100% guarantee of the safety of GMO products, and I will show you practically, even from the National Biosafety Act, what it says, because then we can start to really question and discuss. And this is why it is regulated. This is why GMOs have to be labeled. And the consumer who eats GMOs is assumed to have been giving consent on whatever content and whatever impacts, potential impacts that has on them. And so therefore there is no 100% guarantee of safety. If there was a 100% guarantee of safety, then there will be no regulation of GMOs. Biosafety risks that are associated with the use of GMOs, are too huge to bear. And to the environment, for example, the uncontrolled pollination, uncontrolled gene flow. These GMOs have genes that can flow on to the next generation. And therefore, in our context of small farms, therefore, the risks are so huge that you cannot grow GMO maize and someone else grows their maize, start to maize, without contaminating their maize. And when you contaminate their maize, we will never be able to find those seeds that this farmer was using. We will never be able to find those seeds completely. And it might interest you to know that the people who are pushing for GMOs have already pushed for another mechanism where they are storing all of the world's biodiversity. Yeah, I will not go into that. But, to basically say, okay, so in case we get in a situation where we have completely polluted what we have, then we are going to sell you back some of the seeds that we have kept for such a day. But the issue is really that we are definitely, looking at a very huge risk of contaminating and losing the integrity of our seeds. So the other question that people ask, is it necessary? Is there need or demand for this thing, for GMO foods? Is it really necessary? This is the question. So the necessity question is something that has not been responded to. Of course, when the ban was lifted the other day, you had the government referencing or mentioning that there are 4.5 million Kenyans who are really, going through a hard time, struggling to get enough to eat and to even just go by and to survive and to live. This is completely unacceptable. And that's what I started with. Freedom from hunger is non-negotiable. With or without technology, that is something that as Kenyans we have to learn to say no to that. It's completely non-negotiable. And for 4.5 million Kenyans to be suffering today, and the government using that to say this is why we are bringing GMOs, is completely also unacceptable. Because these 4.5 million Kenyans have not said that they want to eat GMOs. The context is another question. GMOs have been used, for example, in the US, where people farm and where people consume the food or live is completely different. In our context, we live in those farms. So we grow the food and we eat first the food that we grow and then sell surplus to the market. In our context, does the use of GMO foods align with our current food system structure, design, and context? Does it align? It does not, in my view. But this is also another question that people are grappling with. I'm just putting it out there. So, and of course, by context, as I've said, small farms, completely decentralized distribution systems, semi-communal food systems, where we still have a bit of communal, access to food and all that. That your neighbor cannot be starving and you have food. These are some of the things. Some of these things have been completely eroded in other places like the US, but here we still have that, where your mother in the village, requires a bit of support to get seeds or fertilizer. You send her the money, she grows the food. When you go there over Christmas, as many people are going, you go with one loaf of bread and come back with a bag of maize. You have not paid your mother for the maize, but really, we access, and you go to your brother, you get a chicken and all this. We haven't really entirely commercialized food in our society, that there's still that element of communal food systems. And management, the question of management of GMOs in this country is also another question that people are grappling with. Do we have the capacity to manage GMOs in Kenya and ensure compliance? Does the National Biosafety Authority have the capacity? Last time I checked, they had, I think, about 14 technical staff. 14 technical staff. Is that enough capacity to regulate GMOs in this country? Completely no. Has the consumer been consulted? Has the consumer been informed? Has the consumer been involved? Have they been assured? Are they confident with the introduction of GMOs in this country? So these are the questions that are there. We did a study together with InfoTrack, and I'm just going to share some of the insights from that study so that we know we can start responding to these questions. But really, these are the questions that are being asked, and these are the questions that really form part of the debate that we have. So really not entirely about safety, but the other questions are equally, for me, very, 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 very important, especially the questions of context. So some of the things, and this is just to continue to highlight what I've said, and people are asking themselves, even those who are saying that GMOs are the solution, when you ask them, how do they address the problems that we're talking about? And even Stephen, even what you said, that this is what we are being told, that GMOs improve yields. They don't. They don't improve yields. For example, BT maize, GMOs, genetic modification is done for very specific traits. So BT maize, which is genetically modified to introduce genes from Bacillus thuringiensis to make the maize then resistant to pests from the Lepidoptera and Spodoptera family, does not have anything to do with the drought resistance or yields increasing or even reducing the cost of inputs. In fact, they increase the cost of inputs, starting from the seeds themselves, super expensive. And cotton farmers will tell you, those who have tried to grow this, GMO cotton, they will tell you that they are suffering because they pay so much in terms of the seeds. They have to use fertilizers that they have not been using before at that extent. The cotton is now also susceptible to fungi and all these other things. Because remember, before it is genetically modified, it is a hybrid first. And in the process of hybridization, we lose a lot of these genes that, really make this crop wholesome or make this variety wholesome to be able to defend itself. So I will not go into details with that, but these are the questions that people are being asked. And this is the response that, for example, if you graphically present what the government has done, is to say that we cannot continue with the lack of food every year. So we are going to bring GMO seeds to address the food insecurity in this area. But really, if you take the GMO seeds, which are first of all hybrids, into these areas where they are affected by drought, does it solve the problem? It does not solve the problem. If you import GMO maize from the US and distribute to these counties where they have been affected by drought, does it really solve the problem of lack of food every year or frequent droughts, cyclic droughts? It does not solve the problem. So we have to put these things into context so that people can understand. So in the study that we did, 51% of Kenyans do not have top of mind awareness of GMOs. And what is top of mind awareness? It's like I come to you and say, Steve, do you know what GMOs are? Then you will not know. 51% of Kenyans will not be able to respond to that question. Yeah. But when probed further, maybe when you say, these are seeds that have been modified, then maybe, then you have slightly a higher level of awareness. But the fact that top of mind awareness is not there. It's not there. Because again, remember when you are labeling, when you put these products in the market, you don't write a lot of details. You don't write paragraphs on the packet of unga. You will write GMO maize flour. So do Kenyans understand what that means? They don't. Yeah. So and the stories that are out there, people just want to be trendy and all that. People just, GMOs are good. GMOs are more nutritious. They have nothing to do with the more nutrition, unless they have been modified specifically to improve their nutrition. And these are very few varieties. What we are talking about here, being introduced in this country, BT maize has nothing completely to do with improved nutrition. That one I can tell you without any doubt. Of course, these kind of narratives are not being countered by the government, for example, the National Biosafety Authority, because it makes their work easier. It makes these products sellable to the people. They are not being countered by the pro-GMO, the ones who are promoting and selling these GMO things, because it makes their work easier, because the people are being lied to, and the people are being told that, this is the solution, and therefore, they don't want to counter those kind of, really misconceptions out there. 82% of Kenyans who are aware of GMOs get their information from sources other than government. This is from really research done by Infotrack, and I will share the link to the full report so that people can go through it. By the way, this was done way even before the elections. The data was collected way before the elections, and we were really trying to understand the perception of Kenyans around GMOs. So 82% of Kenyans who say they are aware about GMOs did not get their information from government. So who is feeding them with this information? Of course, they are listening to Bill Gates when he comes and says, I have been eating GMO bread since I was born. But I'm like, okay, so since when did we have GMO bread in the market? We don't even have yet GMO bread in the market. So, and these are the sources of information about GMOs. The people who actually promote and the people who actually want to make business out of GMOs are the people who are actually informing the consumers, because the government has failed in its role to actually educate the consumers and put the information out there. So is GMO a miracle or a tragedy? And I'm coming to a close now. Yeah. So as I said, the biosafety risks are too huge to to bear. It cannot be justified. The amount of risks that we are putting ourselves to cannot be justified. So in terms of the cost of managing GMO foods and seeds in the country, it will be too high. I want you to picture, because one of the GMOs are regulated under the National Biosafety Authority, the National Biosafety Act of 2009, and attendant regulations that came later. And one of those regulations is the labeling regulations. GMO foods are supposed to be labeled throughout, from production, the moment you get out of the farm, to processing, to packaging, to retail. They are supposed to be labeled as GMO, as long as they have more than 1% content of GMO food or GMO raw material. And I want you to picture ensuring 100% compliance with the labeling regulations across all retail outlets in the country. And here I'm talking about processed now, like processed maize flour, processed unga. Remember also, even if the farmers are supposed to sell in their, in my village, we call them gorogoro, the tin, the 2 kg tin that they scoop, and, even if you're selling out there in the open market unprocessed, you have to label also. And the National Biosafety Authority must ensure that this labeling is complied with 100% across the country. Tell me how much that will cost. Just have a random guess. It's too much. It's too much resources that we are going to waste to basically monitor products that are coming from outside and they're not ours. And why are we putting ourselves to this cost? And this is taxpayer money that will go into that. So I want us to think about that. This is completely a tragedy. It's not a miracle. This it's almost like saying, okay, so we have so many problems, like almost like what Moses Kuria said, so many problems, but we have now adding one extra problem to deal with. This country today, we have issues regulating even the quality of fertilizer. Farmers are being sold substandard fertilizer. We have issues of regulating pesticide use in the country. So farmers are overusing, misusing. We have issues of dealing with pests and managing pests in the country, surveillance of pests, and issues providing farmers with weather data and information and all that. We are not able to do that. Now we are saying, on top of all those things, we want to add management of GMOs. Completely absurd. The negative impact on Kenyan farmers, this is going to really affect local production, of course, because, GMOs, of course, other countries are way ahead of us. It's not because GMOs are highly productive that their technical efficiency is high, but the farmers are supported and all that. So our farmers cannot, for example, compete with American farmers. And this is what we're putting them to. Yeah. GMOs don't deliver on their promises. Let this be very clear. There are a lot of promises that comes with GMOs. They will say this maize can even be grown in Turkana even when the rains have fallen. Steve, I can see you have come back. But you see, the question is this true or not? It is not true. And globally, there has been spectacular failure of GMOs. And even here in Kenya, BT cotton was allowed since December 2019. Who has had good stories from that? Farmers are complaining the seeds are expensive, they're not seeing the yields that they were promised, they're not seeing the improved livelihoods they were promised, and therefore they don't deliver on their promises. And let us not take their word for it. When someone says, this is the solution to food security problem in Africa, it is not. It is not. So we have to really be clear on what are the false promises and what are the actual technical advantages of GMOs. And the technical advantages are outweighed by the challenges that it comes with. So they don't deliver on their promises. So safe or not, I just want to finish with this. There has been a lot of debate whether civil society are inciting consumers that GMOs are not safe or not. Now, this is the National Biosafety Act, the objects of the National Biosafety Act. This is the wording that is used. In the definitions, if you go to the National Biosafety Act, remember it's called the National Biosafety. And these are the people who are actually leading the brigade out there to say that GMOs are safe. The GMOs are not safe. There is no 100% guarantee. The law defines biosafety as minimization of the risks posed by genetically modified organisms. That is in the definition. So even the National Biosafety Authority, their work is to minimize the risks that are posed to human health and the environment by GMOs that may be posed because there may be risks. The law already envisions this. So no one should tell Kenyans that GMOs are safe, perfectly safe. And in the objects, as you can see, one of the objects is to facilitate responsible research into and minimize the risk that may be posed by genetically modified organisms. Why does the law use such kind of words? Is the law stupid? The law is not stupid. Now, number two, ensure adequate level of protection for the safe transfer, handling, and use of genetically modified organisms that may have an adverse effect on the health of the people and the environment. This is the law that has been enacted. So why are we fighting with this? And yet the National Biosafety Authority is the one that is going to the media every time and telling Kenyans, don't worry, GMOs are safe. If GMOs are safe, those people should be released from their jobs and go home. What are they regulating if it is safe? Why is the law saying that GMOs may pose negative effects? So Kenyans have to read between the lines. And GMOs have only been used for about 30 years. Since the first, in fact, it's about 28 years since the first GMO was commercialized globally. And therefore, there is no one who has eaten GMOs full cycle to know if they are safe or not. And go back again, it's not only about safety that I want to talk about. Go back again to the questions about context, about the risks that are associated with contaminating our seeds and spoiling the integrity of our seeds and all that, and ask yourself, is this really necessary? Now, way forward, the people decide. I don't want to be the one advising people not to eat GMOs or not. The people will decide. Kenyans will decide if they want to eat GMOs or not. So bring it on, let's put it in the shelves. Let's see how many people are going to buy this GMO food. Let us also see how many farmers are going to grow after the first season, after they see that what they are being told by the media, in the media and you know, all over are lies. That what they are being told by the so-called professors are lies. And sorry to say, but really, we have really made this conversation to exclude a lot of Kenyans by making it a conversation about agriculture experts, about professors and people with PhDs in biotechnology and people who, you know, we have been doing this in the laboratory. No, our food, we control it. I determine what I eat. I don't ask a professor, what should I eat for lunch? I'm going to decide what I'm going to eat for lunch. So let Kenyan consumers be really confident about their instincts. And consumers, the instincts of consumers are telling them not to touch this thing. And they will not touch it. And therefore, I don't want to go beyond that. We give people information and then we let them decide. So thank you very much, Steve. Thanks.
Wow, Emmanuel. Hello?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That's a very passionate appeal to Kenyans. Of course, you are on from your side of the taking. But I think you've done quite a good job, and I've also learned from you, to be honest. A couple of things that I didn't know, or maybe misconceptions that are just doing rounds around social media, and maybe some research outputs and all this kind of stuff, and you know. But yes, thank you so much. One of the things that I think was at the back of my mind, I didn't mention, is that particular aspect of right to food, and it's an important one. Let me just recap a few things for the members who might have joined when you had started. Emmanuel has given us a few things to ponder about. And at the back of your mind, as you think about GMOs and just organic foods, you must first note that you have a constitutional right enshrined in Article 43(1)(c), right to food. And he has articulated so well, I want to add to it. But the issue of right to food, looking at it on the nexus of trying to ensure food security for the Kenyan, does not mean that we now embrace GMO as a one-stop, as a silver bullet to issue of hunger and food insecurity. So that's one. Some of the issues that Emmanuel has raised, and I tend to agree, which also now lays on the back of the National Biosafety Authority. And just mention before I continue, we actually invited to this conversation, but they are not available. So we have to continue nonetheless, because it's an issue that is still here with us for a while. So the issue of safety, which is now under the armpit of the National Biosafety Authority, is one that Emmanuel has also touched on. And really, we're asking ourselves, is GMO necessary? Is it? And if it's necessary, how is the management of GMOs in Kenya taking place? Bearing in mind the staff that is available at the Safety Authority. And also an issue that's also recurrent and will be there for a long time. And I don't want to preempt this because our next speaker will speak about it at length, is the issue of seed sovereignty and how the farmer is affected. And Emmanuel, thanks for and I hope you share that link for that study you did with InfoTrack, because it informs some of the articles we want to write going forward, emanating from this discussion. And I didn't know that actually if you're embracing GMOs, then the cost will be higher. I'm really intrigued by that. And I think it's an important thing to note, because from the social media that they are saying that GMOs, actually using GMO, even from the seeds perspective, makes your work much easier. It's cheaper. They are drought resistant, as I was saying. But this has been dispelled authoritatively by Emmanuel. So I think let's take it from him as that. And then the levels of awareness. Personally, I think I just came to realize about GMOs maybe a year or two back. So there might be need to enhance that awareness level. That labeling perspective is also something that needs to be looked at. Yes, you won't find a paragraph written on a packet of meat, so maybe, but yes, I think that labeling is important for consumers to make a choice of what they want, whether GMO or not. BT cotton was introduced the other day. I think it's been going on, and I'm also interested to know that it's interesting to know that that also failed spectacularly, as you're saying. So that also now takes us to the issue of that now GMO seeds or crops are actually not a silver bullet, so to speak. So with all this that Emmanuel has given us now, then we wanted also to get a perspective from the farmers in terms of how they are using the seeds within this GMO perspective. And if Mr. Obuge Bernard, you are online, kindly turn on your microphone. I'll put your presentation up.
Good morning.
Morning, Obuge, go on.
My presentation is on, and I have an echo. I don't know why, but before then, let me do a quick introduction about myself.
Kindly, thank you.
Then I'll give the presentation. My name is Bernard Obuge. I'm a farmer from Trans Nzoia County. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you, the institute, and for inviting me to give a few issues concerning farming. And before I touch on the subject, I want also to say seed is very pertinent.
Obuge, you're mute.
Yes, I'm saying that seed is the genesis of life. And everybody, animals, insects, plants, they start from seed. Speaking after a scientist, I think that I'm a bit not capable of countering him, but however, he has assisted me by saying he's a farmer like my.
Obuge went offline.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Seeds in Kenya is a very important aspect for all of us as farmers. What I want to demystify is the reason that we cannot have seeds managed by farmers to be the seeds that we plant, that we must buy from other people or buy from multinationals. Stephen, could you just roll it up for me? I'm trying with my equipment, it's not moving. Yes, thank you. Leave it there. We have a few things that we need to bring forward to the people. It's always said that we have inadequate awareness. Just as Stephen, you have said that you learned about GMOs 2 years ago. It is true that most of us don't know, even the farmer community. We don't know. We only know how to do farming in an agroecological way. That's what our fathers did, our grandfathers did. The other misinformation on GMOs among farmers about the benefits of GMO, which is not true. And then farmers don't know the biosafety risks associated with GMOs, for example. They don't know about measures that can be taken to safeguard their indigenous seeds in the wake of GMOs. Please move the slide. Steve.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Well, yeah, thank you. What farmers need We need the following services to improve productivity and safeguard our livelihoods in the face of climate change. Number two, we need extension services to be enhanced. We need to have weather information in the face of climate change. We also need information on markets, and we need to access to financial services and also social security services. Move, please.
I've moved.
Yeah, you can move okay, the way forward is we need to listen to our people, and this I'm very keen that it has been an assumption by government and other leading organizations that farmers don't have a say. But I know farmers have a lot if you are only interested to listen to them. There is confusion amongst farmers that this should be addressed with accurate information that hasn't been spiced up to suit the certain narrative. This I mean, like on the information we have on the ground about GMOs, about production, very high production, and so forth, it is not true. Farmers are rational and they will make the right choices with the right information. I advise farmers and consumers to take keen interest in this discussion, also give their voices on the opinion. We need to guard our food system and our seed jealously. As Atamba was presenting, he said something very crucial, and I want to say it here again. This question of inclusivity, most times we don't include the people. We just sit there somewhere and discuss and pass on the information to people without their input. In this country, this is not on the slide, I'll just add, we have farmer managed seeds, and we have seed banks all over the country for our traditional foods, and even the maize, the cassava, and all the vegetables you think of, we have them. We also have seed for plant variety of trees, especially medicinal. This is very important for our people to know that we have them. We also have amongst ourselves people with indigenous technical knowledge on matters medicine and food. In this country right now, organizations are having seed fairs and food fairs where you can go and get the right information. The last national seed fair organization was at the National Museums of Kenya, and we are working very hard on that. Number two, as farmers, we are very keen on the law and policy governing seed. And I'm glad that something is being done on that direction by putting in agroecology strategy in the law, so that now farmers are allowed to operate the way they used to operate, because these things are done over the fence. You can borrow seeds, and you can also buy seeds from other farmers. Lastly, I want to say that our counties should be very keen on formulating policies to help our farmers. I know farmers are the biggest investors because of the land resource they have in this country. The other misconception I want to say here is that this country does not have shortage of food. what I know is we have a shortage of ideas on how to distribute this food to our people who don't have it in this country. Because in one part of the country, food is being thrown away, and the other part of the country, there is no food. If the leadership would have just keenly walked back a step, they could mop up the food from one side and take to the other side. This country is capable of producing the 45 million bags of maize that we require. You may not have known, but I know that we require 45 million bags a year to feed our people. Our counties that produce this maize, I'm sure they can produce maize, wheat, beans, cassava, potatoes, milk. We have in plenty. Another issue that has come up that is very good is that farmers have diversified now, and I'm happy about the agroecology attempt to have a policy so that if we go that direction, our soils will not be depleted. Most of our soils have been depleted because of the use of chemical fertilizers and the chemical sprays. So the soils are so badly off, they need healing, and agroecology will be an answer to soil healing so that our food production system does not get spoiled on the way. I would wish to talk more and more, but I made a very short presentation. Maybe if there'll be need for me to add more information, I'll be guided so that I'll send more than what I've presented today. Or in future, if we have a physical meeting, then we can give you more on where these seed banks can be found, if anybody is interested. Thank you very much, members. That is the presentation I had for today. If there'll be any questions, Steve will guide so that I will hang on a bit, but if there isn't, then I can beg to leave.
Kindly hang on a bit. I'm sure there are questions directed to you as the seed expert.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Wabuge, for that presentation. Very candid, short, but we say short and sweet. So thank you. I think I'll hand this over to my colleague Fiona to take us through the rest of the session. Fiona?
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. My name is Fiona Okadia, and I work under the Economic Competition and Regulation Program. So thank you so much to our guest speakers for the presentation that they've done. So I think I have first, before I go to opening up the session for the participants to ask their questions, you can either type, there's a Q&A section, there's a chat as well, or you can just raise your hand and then I'll see you. So first, when you were speaking about what farmers need, you mentioned access to social services and social security. So I'm just curious to know whether how this ties in with our conversation on GMO, or was it just a general observation that you've made? Bernard, you're mute. Okay, so as we wait, probably I think I see a hand. Mushai? Can I be able to unmute him? Okay, yeah.
Can I go?
I think, Mushai, you can unmute and then ask your question.
Okay, thanks. I had Bernard saying he wanted to, he was okay now. Shall we let him speak first?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go on, Bernard.
Yeah, Fiona, you had asked a question about social security. This is very important to the people.
Right. I think we're having. Mushai, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I think Bernard is the one speaking.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Fiona?
Please go ahead.
Yes. I thought Bernard was speaking. You want me to go ahead?
Yeah, because I can't hear him.
Oh, he was speaking. Okay, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Then I think it's my side.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so mine is just not in terms of questions, because I also had to run, but some comments. I think one is and thanking the Institute of Economic Affairs for looking at this debate. But I think there are some basics we need to agree on to be able to engage in the debate well, right? And I think there are three tenets. I'm glad tomorrow we'll be attending a cocktail with the Institute of Economic Affairs on 52 fallacies, right? But there are three tenets which we should work on. One, I think, is science, right? And I think I would take, let's say, umbrage with when I think it was Atamba saying, we don't want to listen to the professors and to the scientists. So if we don't listen to them, who are we going to listen to? Who is going to give us the information about this? Yes, there will be a debate. Yes, they will disagree. But we need some sort of basic understanding of what science is. Because if we don't have that, then we are kind of, it's a political argument, no longer a factual argument. So I think it's important that we agree, let us debate the science. Let's look at the science across the board. There are different reports, there'll be different views, but let's agree it's got to be one of the things we look at is the science. Secondly, I think from an IEA perspective, because I know the IEA is about liberal economics. And economics, I think we believe in an open market, pro-economic market. So one of the things about it is choice. And one of the stories I like to tell guys, you guess I'm pro-GMO, is we allow people choice. People can choose what they want to use. Because again, there is nothing, even allowing GMO is not a law that requires everybody to plant GMO. It is an allowance. If you want to do it, then you can do it. If you don't, you can take your alternatives. But the question is whether we allow people the choice to be able to use them when they want it. And I agreed with our farmer here, Bwana Wabuge, saying, let people be informed so that they can make the decision and they will decide according to that. And that is the final point I was going to say, is that then it is about being informed. And information is both to the farmers, and I think I take the point also to the consumers, so that people know what they are engaging in and what they are doing. And I think information is going to come from everyone. It's going to come from whether it is the farming community, whether it is from the crop community or from NGOs. I was seeing, I think there was a stat given that 82% of Kenyans get information on GMOs other than government. But that's true about everything. If we think about sex or diabetes or cars or health, we didn't get the information from the government. We get it from other sources. And there's a lot of information out there. So, but the key thing is, can we make that information available so that it is available for everyone else? And finally, I'm just going to say that the science, and why I'm saying the science is that there is none, so far, I have not seen any science that says that this product is harmful or harm to anyone. We have not been shown anybody who has suffered harm. And it is very similar, I think, if you look at the tenets or the structure of the argument, it's very similar to the COVID vaccine we had. Everybody was afraid of the COVID vaccine. We don't know what it can do to you. It may have some risks, etc. But we just say, look, let's look at the science. We do as best as we can within the limits that we have, and then we can apply it. This one has had a better application. It is 30 years. And I think I would disagree with our first speaker that it is still working after 30 years. That is why it is still being sold in very, very many countries. In fact, it is expanding. The EU, I think this year is again relaxing how it is used. In the EU, it is allowed for animal feeds. It is already being planted in some products in the southern EU, but it's allowed for animal feed. So it is there. It is something that is growing in confidence. I totally agree. Consumer confidence is very different from whether it is allowed or not, and consumers should have the choice. That one I absolutely agree. We cannot force anybody. So I totally agree with everyone about we should label clearly. It should be very clear what you are taking. You make the choice, but the choice should be allowed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. At Tamba, I can see your hand is up, so I'm guessing you want to respond to Mushai.
Yes, quickly before he disappears.
All right.
So Fiona, I wish to go.
Sorry, Bernard?
Okay.
Maybe Atamba allows me because I'm pressed with time.
Okay.
I
That's
answer
fine.
that question, then you can proceed.
Okay.
Yeah, issues on social security are very pertinent on the farmer and anybody else because we work and people don't think about health or don't think about savings, don't think about financial management, and it is very difficult going back to the farm without a saving. When you sit down and look at the cost of living, health takes about 70% of what you have because you take care of the whole family. Sometimes what you produce is not able to help. We have gone out of our way to advise our farmers that this is very critical, that they go that direction. They register themselves with NSSF. They register themselves with Linda Mama or any other insurance that is helping them. We have also gone a step further, which has been advertised severally, that we can do crop insurance in the event of climate variability, where you are not sure whether you'll harvest or not. And this can help farmers to recoup their losses if they insure the crops. And if you have a card, for example, of NHIF, if you work in hospital, you're not worried of being asked for a deposit. So kindly, this is the message I wanted to put. It looks like it is outside, but it's very important to the farmer community or the people of this country to know that insurance is very key in anything you do. Even businesses, they insure. So farming is also a business and we must insure.
Okay. Thank you so much for your comments. So we go back to Atamba.
Yeah, very quickly before Mushai disappears, I think, when I made the point about professors and doctors, I was very clear that this is not a discussion of a few people deciding what is good for all of us. And I can say the same even about civil society. Civil society also cannot decide what is good for people and what is not good for people. And unless there is clear proof of where this information is coming from. If civil society is local and bringing the voices of the people from the ground, then there's a different context there. But all of us, regardless of where you are, you have no absolute power of intellectual capacity to actually lecture Kenyans and say, okay, so we think GMOs are safe because we have done this and these studies and this research. What I'm saying is ultimately discussions about food are very personal, and discussions about food are had at very personal levels, and people make decisions at very personal levels and at household levels. And that's why I said in the end, people will decide. So if I sit with my wife and my children and we discuss about this question of GMOs and we decide we're not going to eat it, we're not going to eat it. It does not matter how many professors are going to line up behind the idea of GMOs being safe or not. And this is where we have to allow consumers the leverage. I agree with you. We have to listen to the science. I'm a scientist myself. We have to listen to the science, yes, but we should not be clouded only to the ideas that whatever comes from academia and whatever comes from industry, whatever Bill Gates says is gospel truth. That is where we start to go wrong, especially about food. And we have messed our food system slowly by basically really eliminating local indigenous knowledge, about food, about farming, with knowledge that is coming from outside that definitely influences how we produce our food and jeopardizes our ability to be resilient. For example, I'll just give you a good example. If you ask the academia what kind of food production they think is working, they will talk about large scale farming, medium scale to large scale farming. And they say this is more productive. And even in economics, when we talk about the classical economics and we talk about input, output, and no one really looks into the issues of systems, because farming is about systems. It's not just about putting fertilizer and seeds and then getting the output in the end. And at the end of the day, even in economics, you have then now the diminishing returns, then people start worrying. So I think the question really that we are trying to put in is everyone having a chance to really discuss these issues? Even at the border stage, if they decide, let's agree, so that we are not trying to really like bulldoze. And this is what the industry is doing. And they are using our own local scientists and our own local researchers to basically brainwash Kenyans to believing whatever the industry wants them to say. And some of these scientists, some of these professors and doctors are not even involved at all in the production of GMOs, but they are using, of course, their titles, which come with a lot of power and a lot of influence to lie to Kenyans on TV, on radios, in newspapers, that these GMOs are going to solve their problems. But the good thing is, give it 2-3 years, we will know the truth. Thanks.
Thank you, Atanda. So there's a comment from Raphael, in which he says the role of governments is to find a responsible balance between enabling pesticide use, where such use is necessary to achieve desirable crop production levels, and at the same time help in reducing adverse health issues in the populace. Yeah, so anyone else who has another question?
Fiona, before I go, maybe I'll just add something what Mishai said.
Yeah.
I think the approval in Europe should not be taken as a benchmark at home here. Our scientists, let them do the right work to find out the questions we have been posing all along to tell us whether GMO can be used. And if we used GMO maize for our animals, especially for feed, what happened to us because we consume the animals and we consume the maize? So this science is very good, but it has to be clear to us as farmers and consumers. And the issue of inclusivity, I'm very keen because the consumer organizations in this country are on the platform, and maybe they will come with the information, what they are seeing from us, producers, and what they get. I think anything that is done outside, as much as it's good, let's also do our own down here. Let us not just say, since it has been okayed in America, so in Kenya it's also good. And for your information, the East African community, it's only Kenya that has allowed GMO. Our neighbors in Tanzania and Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, they are not doing that. So we must be very careful because they're our biggest trading partners. They may not trade with us because of the GMO issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Bernard. So before we close, I don't want to lock anyone out. Anyone with a question or a comment? Yes, Kwame.
One of the functions of the Institute of Economic Affairs is to provide a platform for the discussion of questions in public affairs based on evidence and persuaded by the arguments of the people who are most qualified to make that judgment. So for instance, if it was a question on economics, we would ask ourselves, what do the best and most trusted economists say about taxation, for instance? With that view in mind, we understand the cultural questions that people raise regarding genetically modified organisms and whether they should be in food. And I think that is a question that will be settled. Many people think that the evidence suggests one way or the other, but it can only be settled by the best scientists who have no agenda one way or the other. Having stated that as well, I think it would be a big mistake, and I must call it out here, to state that unless that evidence is Kenyan, we shouldn't accept it. Evidence about science does not respect borders and does not respect nationality. So the evidence about the usefulness, for instance, of IT technology that we use, such as the one we are using today, was not dependent on whether a Kenyan thinks that this facility is worth using. What did it depend on? It depends on the best peer review, the best science, and transparent processes for verifying truth, because the function of science and knowledge is to actually verify truth. So at the Institute of Economic Affairs, our function today is to open up this. What I'd like to add is this. Genetically modified organisms have been used in certain places. What we must be cautious about is for anybody, whether we accept it in Kenya or not, to suggest that they're necessarily a silver bullet solution to food security. For this reason, let's place the science aside. The truth about food security is that it is usually an economic problem, and it's an economic problem on the demand side. So for instance, if you look at the state of food security in our country, it tends to come from a shock in a weather shock. Can genetically modified foods help with that? It could help if, for instance, if it develops varieties that are not harmful in any other way, but help for the crops to actually withstand drought. That would be helpful. What we have to be cautious about is GMOs are not necessarily a solution when the problem is an income shock, because GMO foods could help to increase productivity or food supply, but the supply is not the problem. The problem is if Kwame has no money to buy food, whether it's GMO and labeled or whether it is not, then that is the income problem that we need to solve. So yes, I think we should not overstate unreasonably what GMOs would do. At the same time, I think we should not be aggressive against GMO without regard to what the best science has mentioned. That's what the IEA thinks, or rather, that's part of the reason why we'd like to elevate this debate beyond simply scaremongering and fear on one side, and then on the other side, a solution that is based on the view that GMOs are actually a quick fix to food problems, which tend to be questions of employment and income. Thank you very much, Fiona.
Thank you for those remarks, Kwame. You've brought in an interesting angle of the income problem, and it's not a supply problem. So, Atamba, do you want to comment? Okay, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I think Kwame is my senior, and I think I agree with what he's saying completely. The thing that we have to really be careful about, especially when we are touching on something to do with food. The example that he gave, for example, about the IT systems and, like the softwares that we use and all that, how we get to agree what to use and what not to use, or what is good and what is not good, does not necessarily apply in food. Because some of these other systems, especially when you're talking about services and some of the other technologies, really remain at a level where, it's not like a necessity for you, for example, to log in on Microsoft Teams. So the people who use that are affected by that and all that, and they're able to balance the powers between the users of the technology and the providers of the technology. And that's why you see all these conversations on Twitter, for example, with Elon Musk saying this and the users are saying this, and it balances at that level. But when you talk about food, you're talking about life. It's the very core basic need of humanity. And there's a lot of power imbalance that plays at that level. And I agree that, the issues of economics and all that. And these issues do not only affect the access to food, they also affect how much voice you have. And this is why I'm speaking specifically to say that these discussions about GMOs should not only be left at the technical level or laboratory level conversation. These conversations must be had by the people. And I'm very happy you brought a farmer on board today to basically say, okay, this is what farmers are thinking about. And it doesn't matter really, the level of qualification and all that, because you see also some of the, I studied agriculture. Some of my professors do not even have farms. So sometimes the context and the issues on the ground are missed because we are talking high level, and yet the issues are down here. So I agree that basically you were guided by science, but then also when we deal with food, emotions will come. They have to be included. Perspectives of how much connection people have culturally with food will have to be included, so that we have a holistic conversation. Because food is not a technology, and food is not something that we are going to just leave to the market to decide what happens to it. It's something that we really also have to all play a role in making sure that we are doing the right thing, not only for us, but also for the future generations. And the discussions of whether GMOs are useful or not, I'll let the guys who promote GMOs to talk about that. But from the research that I have done myself, because I also do research on these things, GMOs have no added value except for the treatments that they have, which again sometimes also fails. So GMO is a technology like any other technology and should be looked at as a technology. It's not science. Then we can define science and technology and know whether it's a science or technology. It's a basic technology that has to be looked at as such and not to be elevated to a level where it cannot be questioned. So I think that is where I leave it, that we have to ask questions, and every question matters, regardless of whether it comes from academia, civil society, or from the people just out there. Thanks.